There are moments in life when the noise of fear grows so loud that it feels like it will swallow your peace whole. Moments when the weight of uncertainty presses down on your chest and whispers that you must react, defend, struggle, and fight your way through every storm. Yet I want you to pause right now and lean into something deeper, something older than your worry and stronger than your doubt. Because the truth that has carried countless souls through the darkest nights is this: calmness is not weakness when it is rooted in faith, and stillness is not surrender when it is anchored in trust. And as you sit listening to this message, you may be facing battles that have no simple answer, battles that keep you awake long after midnight, battles that make you question your strength, your purpose, even your direction. But I am here to remind you that the greatest victories are often born not from frantic effort, but from quiet confidence that God Himself is moving in ways you cannot yet see. And when you begin to embrace this reality, you start to realize that calmness becomes an act of courage, a deliberate decision to stand in the middle of chaos and refuse to let panic write your story. Because faith calls you to lift your eyes beyond the immediate conflict and behold a wider horizon where divine timing unfolds with precision and grace. And it is in that horizon that your heart discovers the strength to breathe deeply and remain steady while the winds rage. And I have seen lives transformed by this posture of trust. People who once trembled before every challenge, suddenly discovering a grounded assurance that no circumstance could shake. And I have reflected on voices throughout spiritual history that echoed this same conviction. Voices that taught millions to find power in reliance on God, and even the passionate preaching style associated with Jimmy Swaggart reminds us that conviction is not measured by volume or intensity alone, but by the unyielding belief that God's presence is active and alive within our struggles, guiding, defending, and restoring. And when you begin to accept that reality, you start to loosen the grip of anxiety that once dictated your reactions. You begin to understand that every battle you face carries layers you cannot perceive, hidden movements and unseen protections that operate beyond your awareness. And instead of rushing forward in desperation, you learn to stand firm with clarity, recognizing that your role is not always to conquer by force, but sometimes to endure with patience. Because patience invites revelation, and revelation opens doors to breakthroughs that effort alone could never achieve. And as you continue listening, consider how often you have exhausted yourself attempting to control outcomes that were never yours to command. How often you have wrestled with shadows that dissolved the moment you entrusted them to God. And let that realization soften your resistance now. Let it encourage you to step into a mindset where calmness is cultivated intentionally, nurtured through prayer, reflection, and the humility to acknowledge that divine wisdom surpasses human strategy. And this mindset does not deny the existence of struggle, but reframes it, transforming fear into expectancy and turmoil into anticipation. Because when God fights your battles, the narrative shifts from survival to transformation. And even in the waiting, there is growth. In the silence, there is preparation. And in the calm, there is strength being woven quietly into the fabric of your spirit. And that strength becomes the foundation upon which you face tomorrow with renewed resilience. And I urge you to embrace this moment not as passive listening, but as an active awakening, a turning point where you choose serenity over agitat, ion trust over suspicion, faith over doubt. And as this choice settles into your heart, you will notice subtle changes unfolding, your perspective broadening, your breathing deepening, your thoughts aligning with hope rather than despair. And these changes may appear small at first, yet they ripple outward, shaping your actions, influencing your relationships, guiding your decisions. Until one day you look back and realize that calmness was not merely a coping mechanism, but a divine strategy placed within you, empowering you to navigate adversity with grace and authority. And as this message continues to unfold in the moments ahead, hold tightly to the understanding that God's involvement in your battles is not a distant promise, but a present reality, one that invites you to rest internally even while challenges persist externally. And by accepting that invitation now, you position yourself to witness outcomes that exceed expectation, victories that reflect purpose rather than coincidence, and peace that transcends explanation. So remain attentive, remain open, and above all, remain calm. Because what is unfolding within your life may already be part of a greater intervention, a greater unfolding, a greater defense carried out by hands far more capable than your own. And in recognizing that truth, you step into the beginning of a journey that will reshape not only how you confront conflict, but how you understand your place within it. As you continue forward in this reflection, allow yourself to move deeper into the awareness that calmness is not simply an emotional state, but a spiritual discipline. And there comes a moment in every life when faith is tested not in comfort, but in confrontation. Not when answers are easy, but when silence stretches longer than expected. And perhaps you have already felt that moment approaching like distant thunder. Perhaps you have sensed it in the unanswered prayers, the doors that refused to open, the burdens that lingered despite your strongest efforts. And it is precisely there in that tightening space between expectation and reality that the true meaning of trust reveals itself, because trust asks you to remain steady when evidence appears uncertain. And faith calls you to hold your ground when clarity seems withheld. And as this narrative unfolds, you may begin to recognize that the battles you fear losing are often the very arenas where divine power prepares to manifest. Yet suspense arises because nothing about the process feels immediate or obvious. And you start to wonder if calmness is misplaced, if patience is futile, if waiting is merely another word for defeat. And these thoughts attempt to shake your composure, urging you to react impulsively, to abandon the stillness that once gave you strength. But pause and consider that transformation frequently occurs in the hidden intervals, in those stretches of time where outcomes are forming quietly beyond perception. And history is filled with testimonies of individuals who stood on the edge of despair, only to discover that their endurance positioned them perfectly for renewal. And it is here that you must confront the inner tension between urgency and surrender, between action and acceptance, and understand that calmness does not eliminate responsibility, but clarifies it, allowing you to act with intention rather than desperation. And as this awareness deepens, reflect on how easily fear distorts perspective, magnifying obstacles until they appear immovable, yet shrinking possibilities until they seem unreachable. And through calm reflection, you reclaim proportion. You see challenges as temporary and opportunity as enduring. And this restoration of vision is itself a form of divine assistance, guiding you toward choices aligned with wisdom rather than impulse. And still the suspense continues to build, because faith often walks beside uncertainty longer than comfort prefers. And you may feel suspended between hope and hesitation, sensing that something significant is unfolding, yet unable to define its shape. And this tension can feel overwhelming, but it also signals growth, signaling that your spirit is expanding to contain new understanding. And in this expansion, you become receptive to subtle reassurance that arrives not through spectacle, but through quiet conviction, the kind that settles into your heart and whispers that you are not abandoned, not overlooked, not alone, and it reminds you of those teachings and sermons that once stirred your spirit, messages spoken with fervor reminiscent of Jimmy Swaggart that emphasize persistence in belief, even when evidence falters, and such remembrance reinforces your resolve to remain composed, to remain attentive, to remain anchored. And as minutes turn into seasons and seasons into revelations, you start to notice patterns emerging, small shifts aligning circumstances, fragments of resolution assembling into coherence, and suddenly the suspense that once weighed heavily begins transforming into anticipation rooted in the recognition that unseen forces have been active all along, arranging, correcting, protecting, and guiding. And this realization does not erase the memory of struggle, but reframes it, transforming anxiety into appreciation, transforming doubt into testimony. And you come to see that every moment of uncertainty contributed to a narrative larger than immediate perception allowed, and within that narrative your calmness played a crucial role, preserving clarity when confusion threatened to overwhelm, sustaining hope when discouragement attempted to dominate. And as this paragraph draws toward its close, carry forward the understanding that suspense in your journey is not evidence of abandonment, but invitation to deeper trust, invitation to cultivate resilience that endures beyond outcomes, an invitation to embrace the unfolding story with patience and expectation, because even now there are developments beyond your awareness, solutions forming, protections surrounding, and pathways opening that will soon reveal themselves. And when they do, you will recognize that remaining calm was never an act of passivity, but an expression of profound faith, positioning you perfectly to witness the battles resolved in ways that affirm not only divine intervention, but the strength that has quietly grown within you throughout every uncertain moment. Now, as this journey of reflection reaches its final movement, allow your spirit to settle into the understanding that everything spoken so far has been leading toward a realization that is both simple and profound, a realization that invites you not merely to hear inspiration, but to embody it, because calmness rooted in faith is not meant to remain theoretical, but to become the living atmosphere of your everyday existence. And as you carry this awareness into the unfolding hours and days ahead, you may begin to notice how differently you approach the pressures that once unsettled you, how your thoughts pause before reacting, how your heart steadies before assuming the worst, and how your perspective widens enough to recognize divine purpose where you once perceived only delay. And this transformation does not occur in a single instant, but grows steadily, nourished by remembrance, reflection, and a commitment to trust beyond what your senses confirm. And within this growth lies the culmination of the message that has been unfolding around you, the invitation to stand composed while God fights your battles, not as an abstract phrase, but as a daily orientation of the soul, shaping how you confront uncertainty, how you interpret challenge, and how you measure victory. And as you reflect on this truth, consider how many victories have already taken place quietly within your life. Moments when protection shielded you without announcement, when guidance redirected you without explanation, when strength sustained you without recognition. And acknowledging these moments deepens gratitude. And gratitude fortifies calmness. And calmness strengthens faith, forming a cycle that elevates your spirit beyond temporary distress. And this elevation enables you to perceive your story not as a sequence of random events, but as a tapestry woven with intention. And even when threads appear T-angled, you trust that the final pattern carries coherence and beauty beyond immediate comprehension. And through this trust, your identity shifts from one defined by reaction to one defined by assurance. Assurance that no battle arrives without purpose and no trial persists without resolution. And as you embrace this assurance, you also inherit responsibility, the responsibility to carry calmness into spaces where others falter, to model faith where others hesitate, to reflect peace where others expect fear. And this influence extends beyond words, touching lives through presence, attitude, and example, demonstrating that serenity grounded in belief possesses transformative power. And it is here that the message aligns with traditions of passionate proclamation and heartfelt conviction, often associated with voices like Jimmy Swaggart, reminding you that inspiration becomes meaningful when translated into action, when encouragement becomes embodiment, and when belief becomes demonstration. And so you step forward resolved not only to receive reassurance, but to radiate it, allowing your composure to testify silently to the strength within you. And as you continue living with this intention, you may encounter moments where doubt attempts to resurface, where circumstances challenge your stability, where questions demand immediate answers. Yet you meet these moments differently now, grounding yourself in reflection, returning to stillness, reaffirming trust, and remembering that calmness is not dependent on circumstance, but sustained by connection with God. And this remembrance restores equilibrium, enabling you to proceed with clarity rather than confusion. And over time, such consistent practice transforms your character, shaping resilience that endures beyond fluctuation, shaping patience that withstands frustration, and shaping hope that outlasts disappointment. And as this shaping continues, you come to understand that the battles you once feared were never intended to diminish you, but to refine you. And through refinement emerges purpose. Through purpose emerges contribution. And through contribution emerges legacy. And your legacy becomes defined not by conflicts faced, but by composure maintained, by faith demonstrated, by peace shared, and by lives influenced through quiet confidence that God remained faithful in every season. And this understanding brings the message to its completion, not as an ending, but as a commissioning, ascending forth with renewed perspective, renewed strength, and renewed commitment to calmness in the presence of adversity. And as you move forward from this moment, hold firmly to what has been spoken, revisit it in thought, apply it in practice, and allow it to guide your responses when uncertainty appears again. And may your steadiness continue to affirm that divine support surrounds you always, working beyond sight, acting beyond expectation, resolving beyond comprehension, and sustaining beyond limitation. And with this final encouragement, let your heart remain attentive to growth, receptive to guidance, and anchored in faith. And remember, as you continue engaging with messages such as this one, that your participation sustains the sharing of encouragement and inspiration with others who seek the same reassurance. And therefore, take a moment now to respond in support and connection, because